And we're live. We're locked in. You're locked on. We're live, and this is Misaligned. Tonight, we're talking numbers, reality, myths. Does the pay gap, the gender pay gap, mean that women are undervalued? Or are they just making different choices? It's an interesting question here. We'll start thinking about this one. Is the patriarchy, the all-encompassing, the all-gracious,
There we go
benevolent
again.
patriarchy, preventing women from being able to get to where they should get to? Is it holding them back, or is the market just responding to the facts of reality? Well, we're going to get into the real economics of gender today. Yemi, you want to take us in?
Yes, there we go again. This good old patriarchy. We're back again. Thanks for everyone for joining us. We're talking about the gender pay gap today. Is it real? Is it a myth? Or are there some sort of explanations behind it that makes it neither a myth or nor the reality? We're going to delve into it today. Thanks for joining everyone, and good to be with you again, Cross. I suspect Jab might be joining us later. We'll see how he goes, but let's dive straight into it. I suspect that I know where you stand on this, Cross, but you never really know.
There'll be no
Is
surprises.
the gender pay gap a myth?
I think now this is one of those ones where I initially started off with, you know what I'm like. I'm very, very boom. I picked that point, and I think I fully understand that point, and I drive to it. But this is one of those ones where my answer is multifaceted. It's yes and no. Is it a myth?
Fantastic start. Right. Yes and no.
You know,
I really like
yes.
that. And I say that because yeah, but let me let you land.
No, go for it. I can always come back to
No,
to
no, I'm
yeah.
happy. I'm just acknowledging that I like that sort of start.
Because
I'm not trying
in
to
my
add
head it's
anything.
like this. There's so in the no paradigm is that, well, you can explain it away to factors that well beyond gender. So I mean, in my mind, when we talk about the gender pay gap, we're saying the standard thing about women are paid 80 cents or 80 cents on the dollar, 85 pounds, 85 pence on the pound. And I think in Nigeria it's about 74 a kobo on the naira or something like that. It's quite significantly different. But then when you say, well, it's due to gender, it's like, well, not really. Is there a Yoruba Igbo pay gap? You know what I mean? And if you find that there's a pay gap, is it because people are Yoruba, they're Igbo, because they're Scottish or they're English? It's like, well, you can't necessarily run along those lines, which is
So that's where correlation doesn't equal causation.
causation. Correct. Exactly. Hello, Jab. We are almost complete.
Yep.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Good
Hi.
to have
Thank
back.
you. Thank you.
Hi,
Hope
Jam.
you had a good trip last
Uh,
week.
I did. Yes. Thank you. And sorry for joining late.
Better late than never, right?
Okay.
Cool. So what was I think so. Just a bit of a re-up for you, Jab. On it's just basically what we're just talking about, trying to define positions really about the pay gap. Is it real or is it not? I'm holding a sort of a dual position for one of the first times. Although I tend to lean towards, and I'm sure I'm sure we're gonna end up pushing me to choosing one side, and I know what side I'm probably going to land on. But I'm going with the yes and no. I think it's a myth, but I think there's also some truth to it in terms of the expression or how it's being calculated. So I'm saying it's a myth because there are other factors that we're going to get into, obviously, as we go through this conversation, that determine wage, which is not specifically focused on gender. And it's not even focused on gender at all, although there's some traits that are linked to it. The other thing is that, well, why I say it isn't is that it when you break it down to the barest possible minimum aspects of it, there are still things that say that it isn't a myth, whether it's through personal choices or through societal structures that have enforced things being what they are, or biological reasons. But these reasons still exist to a degree, which are real. I think that's my position at the high level, which is, again, it's a bit fluffy, but I'm sure we're going to delve into that.
Thanks, Cross. I think so far I'm with you. I'll frame it slightly differently, but we're more or less together on that. I think sometimes the problem can actually be in the question, and sometimes the question forces one into the dichotomy that you're talking about. That one doesn't have to take. So I would say, unlike you saying, you've answered the question very nicely. Is it a myth or is it real? And you've said it's a bit of both. I would actually take the sort of other half full or half empty, or whatever you want to call this, way of looking at it and say it's neither. But in the same, we basically arrive at the same position anyway, but it's just how we describe it. I'd say it's neither. So it's neither a myth nor the reality. And I think it's for the same reasons that you're beginning to point out. There is a pay gap, okay? So if you run the numbers, men earn on average more than women. That's clear. Now the devil comes in the detail. My view is, again, what's causing this? I think it's a combination of things. And I think some of it is justified in the agitation that people make who say there is discrimination. Some of it is, and some of it isn't. So, for example, I have female colleagues that I work with who are just as competent as me, many times more competent than me. They're, I've looked up to many of them. They're brilliant. Some of the people who've taught me some of the skills I've learned, that I've admired the most, their work ethic and brilliance and competence have been female. There's nothing to suggest that I can outperform them skill-wise, competence-wise. And I say this in all honesty. I'm sure you know me by now. If I felt differently, I'd say that. But hand on heart, some of the most competent people that have, mentored me and taught me, and you're talking way back, you're talking even back from school days, women. Having said that, though, there are some advantages that I have that may then even out some of that competence difference, the advantage that they hold on against me. And I'm not saying all men have it, but it's more likely that a man might have that. For example, I work some very long hours, right? Doing a combination of two different jobs. And that's partly because of how we've kind of arranged things domestically that enables me to be able to do that. I think that more women will struggle with that kind of arrangement in my position. So again, it's got nothing to do with competence, but this is, and that will reflect in the pay statistics, for example. Okay, so that's one thing. And then women will get pregnant, many of them, not all. At some point, they'll take time off, they'll come back, and just imagine if you did this 4 or 5 times through a lifetime. And I keep going to work all of that time. Even some of the achievements that they've managed to acquire in this time, I can make up for that with the time that I haven't gone off, for example, if that makes sense. And it erodes some of that difference. And so again, that is reflected in some of the statistics that we're seeing. And you're more likely to be promoted if you've not taken extended time off, and whoever's taking extended time off for no fault of theirs. It could be pregnancy, it could be sickness, it could be all other sort of caring responsibility. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you've not been there, you're some, in a sense, disadvantaged. So all of that's factored in. But it goes beyond that. I think once you now think about that, some of those prejudices then carry over into how people employ and make decisions about entitlement, about promotions, because they think, hang on a minute, she's a woman, she may not be, available all the time because of these reasons we've mentioned. And so in a sort of prejudicial manner, they get disadvantaged in addition to the real sort of almost justifiable, inevitable reasons, if you like, that I believe there are unjustifiable reasons that then come on top of that. It's very similar to all cases of prejudice that you see, like racism and things like that, where, there's some reasons that can be explained by just how things are set up, but then that becomes a source of prejudice itself. But that's my view. I'll just stop for now. I see Jobs listening intently. I suspect that he is ready to go.
Jab has been chomping at the bit for this one.
Right.
No, so it is an interesting conversation and subject, but I am just wondering, are we saying that adjusted for all of those factors that you've discussed, that there is no difference between men and women?
It drops to less than 5%. In almost all studies, it's somewhere between 4 to 7% across all studies everywhere that they've looked at. Once you account for additional factors, including age, length of experience, occupational selection and choice, industry, years of experience, skill sets, job titles, it equates pretty much eliminates it. The thing about that remaining gap as well is the fact that there's, and this is what the statisticians were saying, that there's also what tends to happen, which we put in statistics, is called the error term, where we've also got this thing called the error term in statistics, where you basically say, well, there's other factors that I don't necessarily know I can account for. So because maybe I've not just run into those variables, I've not really thought about what the possibilities could exist within that space, or just something outside the scope of this study. It can be accounted for using that error term. So it basically gets eliminated.
I haven't looked at the data, but I think what you're saying sounds very intuitive. Maybe not. Yeah, it sounds really intuitive. I wouldn't, on face value, I wouldn't argue with that data.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree. I'm learning. So, but yes, I would. It sounds like you say intuitively. I think it sounds credible.
And there's some things that you consider as well that I found quite interesting. So to something that you've raised 2 points there that I thought were good, Yemi. The first one was the bit about the children and maternity leave. And I think we don't really understand how impactful that is. Although the world is changing now, so we're having a bit more equality in the West, particularly with the rise of feminism and what I like to even think about male feminism, which is men becoming women in some way. But anyway, that's a separate conversation we probably have. But with the rise of this view or this version of equality between men and women, which means a fluid gender role, it's changing. But the calculation is that for each child that a woman has, it costs her 5% of her total wage earnings. There's a 5% reduction in the total wage for each child. If she has 4.
Sorry, if I can just add to that, Cross, just to buttress that point. And it's not just what you lose now. It's also the fact that the time that you're off has stopped or slowed down your progression. I mean, there's no way. So someone who's my age mate, who's a woman who has 3 children, if I work exactly as hard as them and we're just exactly equally competent, I would have an edge over them over time for just 3 kids. And then there's no, they're not catching up. They have to be miles better than me to be able to make up that time.
Yeah.
And so that's a factor. And we're not going to be able to. I think we've done a lot to equalize that, but it doesn't seem to me that that's going to go away anytime soon.
But should it go away, though? I think it's probably another question. I don't even know if that's even still one of the segments that you've got on this one, Yemi. But I start wondering with things like that to say, well, if the gender pay gap does exist, which I'm still yes and no, but if it does exist, should it actually go away? Do we want it to go away?
It depends on who you ask, and that's why I think it's very important to have these conversations, right? And that's why I think it's also very important how we frame the conversations, okay? Because when you hear these conversations had, sometimes people can't get past is it a myth or not? Okay, we can frame this question differently and not get hung up. Do you see what I mean? Well, thankfully, we managed to get past that. But because often the problem is in the question. So, because when you begin to instantly frame a gender pay gap as a bad thing, right? Then there's a problem, right? Because you can't, it's hard. People talk past each other, okay? If there's a gender pay gap, is there a gender pay gap, yes or no? You don't have to assume or make an assumption that borders on a value judgment instantly. If there's a pay gap, it may or may not be a bad thing. It depends on what's causing the pay gap and what's sustaining it and what are the trade-offs. It depends. Again, I'm not saying that I've got settled answers on those particular points, but that's what it depends on. You can't simply say, if there's a pay gap, then it's a bad thing, then we must get rid of it. Again, I'm with you on that, which, 20 minutes in, you and I have aligned almost fully, which almost feels abnormal. But, that's
First time for everything.
It is what it is today.
I mean, go on, Jab.
Yeah, so can I throw that question back to you then?
Mm.
Which is to say, what is the argument against not fixing it?
That's a good question. I like that one. And that's exactly what's in the subtitle there at the moment as well. Is that to fix it, there's two things that we can do. We can do equality or we can do equity. We can do equality of outcomes or equality of opportunity. Now, I think we've got as close as possible as any society could ever get to in history of creating equality of opportunity across all genders, races. Well, maybe a bit more about the race and nationality thing, but certainly across genders. All genders now have the opportunities to go do whatever it is that they want. And there are no jobs that say you're a man, you can't get in there, or you're a woman, you can't get in there. There are no jobs, there's no training opportunities that are removed. There's lots of schemes that are put in place now for women to particularly come into areas which are male dominated. There are now quotas that are established, etc. And same vice versa for men, where men are being asked to become more engaged in becoming nurses, teachers, etc. Now,
will Sarah agree with this?
That would be good to hear. I mean, it'll be interesting to hear what she thinks. Yeah, I think she might. But in that and that's the first thing that can be done. What that has done, though, especially when you start looking at the studies, and there's an interesting study that I was reading ahead of this, and it's the same study I've referenced in previous pieces, but I was reading an extension of that study that looked at the what happens with gender outcomes in more egalitarian cultures and countries where men and women are just giving the opportunity to become whatever they want. You're not being told as a boy to have blue and girls to have pink. As a guy, you're not being told to deal with carpentry, and women are told to deal with dolls. That is in schools and in the culture itself. Everyone's permitted to become what they want in a very neutral fashion, and then the outcomes start becoming even wider. The pay gap itself starts expanding. The choices that men and women make start diverging even more. So the equality angle is a complex one. It's the equity that now becomes a thing, or equality of outcomes. So if we're now saying what we need to do now, therefore going forward, is to mandate going forward in every single industry, 50% of the execs are going to be men, 50% are going to be women, 50% of the actual staff and workers will be men, and 50% will be women. Pay has to be equal across all these ranges that we set, basically communism, right? God bless China. But if we start doing these kinds of regimes, what ends up happening is more damaging to society than the alternative of allowing men and women to default to their gender roles. I think that, to me, is the argument against trying to push for removing the gender pay gap, is because, well, what route are you going to use to do it? If you give people the option, they won't eliminate it. They continue to carry on this pattern. If we force it through, we're going to have to do very dangerous things for society.
But why should it even be eliminated? So it depends on, exactly. Again, this is where things really need to be cautioned. So you see this all the time. I think what my point of view about this sort of topics is that your ultimate guiding principle, certainly from my point of view, should be human flourishing. Okay, so you're trying to create a situation where people can feel free and motivated and equipped to do the things that they want to do, right? And if you can provide all of that, and you end up with a pay gap, so be it, right? As long as what you're getting is this what you wanted to do? Yes. Is this how you wanted to do it? Yes. Are you happy to do this? Yes. Did you have all the support you wanted to do this? Yes. And it produces the gap. So let's think about it this way. You've got two children, and they both, wanted to do different things. So one wanted to be a footballer, and you supported them, they followed their dream, and the other one wanted to be an astronaut. You supported them, they followed their dream, and they both had all the opportunities they wanted in life. One turns out to be an astrophysics professor, doing well, successful, presenting papers at the best conferences in the world. And the other turns out to be a Premier League footballer, also doing well, both of them top of their fields. But one's like 20 times wealthier than the other. So what? Do you see where I'm coming from? And, yeah, so what? And so this is where I think we need to begin to kind of really go into thinking about life choices and opportunities rather than fixated on data that may not explain. Again, I'm not saying the data is not important. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying, the devil's in the detail. We need to understand what the data is telling us and find out what about that is a problem, which I've pointed out some of that I think I can identify. What is it there is a problem? So we don't necessarily need to fix everything. We pick what is a problem there. And I put it to you still that I accept that in today's world, even in Europe, boys probably still have lots of advantages over girls, and men have advantages over women. There are some advantages the other way, but I think I think on a whole, it's probably still easier to be a man than a woman. But I might be wrong about that. Again, this is I say that as.
Could I ask? So I'm learning, right? I'm learning on this. So forgive me. I'm going to be asking loads and loads of questions and just trying to learn even more. So to go back to your example with the father and two boys, one a footballer and the other, I can't remember what job he was that he did, but say he was a doctor, so some or any other random job. I'm not sure that example is a good one to use when you introduce gender, because if it was a daughter, she then might say she has 4 children, right? And say she becomes along the way a single parent. From everything we've said tonight, she is going to be disadvantaged, isn't she? And yes, you just mentioned, I saw Cross squirming in his seat when you mentioned that boys still have more advantages than girls. I don't know, but
I'm not sure about that either. But I'll hedge my bet on that.
Yeah. I think it's true. So I am learning on this. But okay, so let's accept that they do. So given the fact that there is this inherent advantage, plus those difficulties that the daughter in this example has experienced, do you not feel that we need to eliminate or address this? And how best would you do it?
So I would, the first thing I'll eliminate, Jab, is the word eliminate itself. But I get where you're coming from. I'm sure you get what I mean. I think that word is so strong. We can eliminate polio and malaria. Sorry?
Should we say level?
Fair enough. I'll go with that one. Okay. But just to address the point, and I'll pick up on the first thing. One of the things you mentioned, which I kind of struck me the most. You said, if someone becomes a single mother, for example, what I'd say to you about that, I believe in socialism, and I'm sure you and I have had lots of conversations to the extent that I think you'd be clear about that. That I believe in socialism. I believe in leveling up. I believe in evening out disadvantages that people have, particularly those that are almost, they just happen, okay? And I believe that
in this instance, you can't run away from your biology. You can't run away from
absolutely. So I believe that to the core, and I believe that someone who's disabled should not be getting the same treatment as someone who's able-bodied. In the same way, they've got to be. You've got to provide reasonable adjustments as a society that makes that disability easier to bear, even if you can't take all of that away. Having said that, though, you still have to retain a system of incentives. You have to. So if you've got two women, again, let me make this example. So you've got two women. One decides to have a family and have 4 kids, and another one decides not to have a family and kids. You cannot equalize both of them and have one make different life choices and yet be able to benefit what someone who didn't benefit from your own life choices. Did you see where I'm coming from? That in fact is the definition of unfairness, right? Because you get the benefit of all the joys that we know come with a family. You know, there are problems with it, but there are joys that come with it as well. And someone's decided not to do that and said, you know, I just want to focus on my work. And you're saying, oh no, but we've got to find a way to level their wages. No. That in fact to me is the definition of unfairness. We still have to take responsibilities for our own actions. We have to take responsibility for our own life choices, good or bad. Okay, society helps, but you cannot equalize people despite their life choices. It won't work. You have to have systems of incentives. When people forego one thing to do another thing, they have to be rewarded for that. That's my view.
If I could throw my 2 cents in, I think I completely and this is one of the areas where I'd say absolutely not. This is one of those scenarios that you're giving me now, especially with the premise, because, well, one, I agree with the Emmy's point about the incentivization, but I also think there's a couple of things that are important to point out. I'll walk back and then I'll come back forward. So the premise that you gave was a single mother who has kids, and then, you know, that's a disadvantage. There's a couple of things that come with that. One is the fact that 70% of the time women are the ones who leave the relationships anyway, and the reasons why they tend to leave the relationships tend to be irreconcilable differences or monetary challenges, which to me I don't think are valid reasons to leave a relationship personally. I mean, I just don't think so, especially once you have children, because your responsibilities have changed. But I'm even going to grant that, and I'll go a step back and look at the Yemi's premise that he gave earlier about men having advantages. I definitely do not agree that men have advantages in life compared to women. That's not even by a mile. If you could line up the privileges that women had one by one as a book, and I can't throw it far enough for it to cover how many privileges women have.
Can you tell me just 2 or 3?
Yeah, of course. So one is going, but just two is pretty easy. One is going to be women outreach programs. So there are lots of programs that deal with women's homelessness, women's shelter, and protecting women. Even if you even type right now, wife beats me at home, and you're going to get a bunch of random posts. If you write husband beats me, you're going to see an emergency number pop. Try it. This is a well-known thing.
Because the vast majority of people who make out serious domestic violence are men.
No.
Again, you cannot.
No. Again, it's not the stats. That's not necessarily true either. It's not necessarily true. Men don't report it as much.
No. I'm talking about very serious ones. So go and Google it.
Yes, men are more.
How many men kill their
violent.
women in this, their partners in this country per year, and then Google the other one. How many women kill their partners? It's stark.
Yeah, but again, so generally men are generally
stark.
Men are the 2 things with men. Men are obviously stronger than women, but men are also generally more violent by disposition.
But I'm just explaining what justifies. You're right, totally. But that's what justifies why there's more serious support for women. I mean, would you have it the other way around? Who's dying from domestic violence? Who is dying from domestic violence, Cross?
It's not just dying, because there are men that suffer from.
Who is being hospitalized for domestic violence, Cross?
I understand this, but that doesn't mean that domestic violence does not happen to men.
No.
So saying it doesn't happen, we should
doesn't. But
we're not saying it doesn't. We're talking
I'm
about.
just explaining to you why the serious support tends to be
But
focused on women.
no, but my point is there is zero support for men. If anything, it tends to be all these men groups that are very, very underfunded, don't necessarily have any kind of buy-in from any governmental agencies or even communitarian systems or structure. It's almost seen as ridicule for a man to come out to talk about being violently abused.
Totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So there are problems with the support that men.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
agree
want
with
to go
that.
too deep because that's just one example. Another example is even looking at things
but you have not showed a disparity between men and women there. We have actually proved that women have it worse from
no, but it's
injuries and
not
death.
about okay.
But
It's not about
1 second. So why do you think those supports are there in the first place?
Because
To me, that itself proves that women are disadvantaged. You know.
No, not at all. In fact, the reason, this supports
Let
aligned with other.
me explain. Let me explain. Those numbers exist because, as Yemi is pointing out, men are biologically stronger than than women. They have, maybe because of the testosterone, temper control, all of those sorts of things. So disproportionately, women are victims compared to men. That's not to say that some men are not victims of domestic violence. That's not the point. But the support is there. Those numbers that you're talking about are there because women are, by proportion, victims of domestic violence. So that you can't use as an argument to support as an example to support your argument.
I'm saying that the reason why I'm using. Sorry,
I just said I agree with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, the reason why I still want to maintain that, and again, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm pointing out that it exists, and that's one of many things. So
what other examples do you have?
I have other examples. So there's things around even parental rights, for example. Generally speaking, women tend to get access to children in most cases by default.
Who would you give? Again, we have to examine. So you're a judge, right?
I get what you're saying.
Who are you going to give access to the child? Again, let's examine. Who do you think naturally, in most cases, the child is better off growing up with in the case of a separation? Again,
statistically, it is better with the man. Women who raise children tend to raise most of the people who are criminals, who are malfunctioning adults within. This is factual. You can shake your head all you want. I'm happy to provide the statistics on this.
No.
Let me at least say it. Let me say it. Right.
Okay.
Single mother households perform significantly worse in raising functioning high functioning adults. The children are less likely to go to school
compared to
I'll finish comparison.
Compared to marriage.
Not just marriage. Wait. Let me get my thought out. Let me get.
We just want to understand.
I know. But let me say it so you can understand.
What I'm trying to understand is the statistic you're given. Is that compared to a home where there's a father and a mother, or is that compared?
Let me just walk through the logic. It's easier for me to walk through logic than I can explain that. So, single mother households are significantly more likely to raise delinquent children who do not attend college or attain higher levels of education, have lower income generating capabilities as well as they age, and what's the last one? And they in prison as well. The highest proportion of male prison inmates come from single mother households. Now, this is in comparison to two-parent households, which, interestingly enough, single father households perform very closely to two-parent households. Think about that for a second. Single father households compare very similarly to two-parent households in terms of raising kids that are not delinquent, better contributing members of society.
Can I answer that? Again,
sure.
You're making the fallacy that we very tactfully, all of us, avoided in the first question when we were looking at
causation correlation, right?
Yes, this is the fatal fallacy you're making here, and I'm going to explain it to you. So what you find is that the vast majority of single parent households are single mothers. Like vast majority. I will have to look up.
Like that.
I have to look up the numbers. So firstly, you are then comparing apples and oranges because they're not, and I'll explain to you why. Just let me land. they're not exactly the same here. Okay, so just let me land. Just let me land. Let me finish what I'm saying. Because what tends to happen often, yeah, for the man to get custody, and I say this, I kind of know a little bit about it. For a man to get full custody, it tends to often be because there's really demonstrably huge problems with the female household. Okay, so what tends to happen is that even if there are moderate problems, right, the judges still often grant them, which then you
Privilege to
might
women
argue
again. So go on.
probably not. Okay,
Mhm.
so what you're finding there is that they almost always get the child. Okay,
Yeah.
and that will be reflected. So all of the good ones and the bad ones. If a man just shows a tiny bit of problem, the judge is not going to give
Yeah,
him
it's over. It's a wrap.
Okay,
That's it.
so
Yeah.
so that means you're comparing apples and oranges.
No, I'm not.
No. Again, let me finish. It doesn't. So that means that it doesn't prove that fathers raise children better than mothers. What it proves is that we're probably not doing the hard work enough of making sure that we vet to the extent that we should. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, I don't think that made sense to you from your look.
No,
But
I'm trying
okay,
to relate it to.
okay. I'll say it again. Because we're more predisposed to giving the child to the woman, and so we're a bit more lax with the standards that we expect the single parent to possess to be able to grant them custody compared to the man. So for example, if a woman can demonstrate usually even basic problems with the parenting of a man, he probably won't get sole custody of the child, right? He just won't. But the bar that we've set for a woman to lose custody of her child is higher. Okay, so that's one of the things we need to be looking at. That the vetting is perhaps one of where the problem is, not whether men raise children better than women. They don't.
That doesn't compute. I doesn't
I
compute.
think Jab understands this. I've said it twice now.
No, but
I'm not sure if I
I'll
said
tell you
it
why it
quite
doesn't compute,
nicely.
because you need to look at, you're not comparing the right things. So you're saying that the bar, because it's not that the bar for men is higher. You're not saying the men have to be better, so therefore they're raising better children. No, is that the women have to be really bad for the man to be able to take custody of the children. That's literally what you said, right?
Let me explain it again.
You
So
can be a fantastic guy if the woman is okay. You're not getting custody of that child.
So let me come back to that point so that I don't forget the other things I was going to say. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that usually when you get a separation, right? Not always, but it's a lot more common that there are underlying issues with finances, with employment. And so those children tend to have disadvantages that go beyond just the separation. Okay. And the majority of them are within single mother households. So even though it's correct that single parent households do produce these problems, the underlying reasons are fairly well known. And then two people just do a better job than one person. Again, this is not rocket science, is it? Like if you have two people looking after two children, they're going to do a better job than one person. Plus, you also have the male-female role model kind of thing, which evidence shows kind of models better. And often what you get is a single mother is more likely to struggle financially than a single father. Again, there's a long list of reasons.
For all the reasons we discussed.
Yes. So you have to interpret this into whatever data you have to make this interpret, just the same way we did with the gender pay gap, which we did. This is exactly what we did. We didn't just take it at face value and just run with it. There's often layers of issues there that you need to pick apart, and this is some of it that I'm suggesting to you.
No, because again, I get what you're saying. A lot of this stuff, I've done a lot of this research to understand that what are the correlates between these bits, what are the sample sizes, what are the demographics that are involved across this. Even when you account for that, whether, again, very similar thing, socioeconomic background, whether you account for age, whether you account for race and other bits and pieces across it, nationality even as well. Generally speaking, single mother households tend to have, but that's a separate, this is even a complete deviation from where we're even going. The main thing I was trying to point out was that there's societal things that society treats women differently than it treats men. The initial point was that you raised that men have more advantages than women. That was the first conversation that we're having before we went all the way down into these, this massive rabbit hole that we've gone. But the fundamental piece being that women have multiple things, one of which I was talking about was about the legal aspects of it, where women tend to have more custody and bits and pieces across that, parental rights, winning in family court, etc. Even when it comes to things like alimony, not that common, to be fair, in the UK, but generally alimony, even things like that, having support after a marriage, men don't get any of that kind of view or any of those kind of things. Social sympathy and general expression, women can be vulnerable,
I think you are describing measures that have been put in place to address historical inequality.
No, I am absolutely not.
I just didn't want to interrupt you, but exactly what I was thinking.
Those are saying that for those reasons, women are better advantaged than men. But actually, those are measures that we put to correct historical.
Let me run through them, and then you can tell me how we've put these measures in place. So I'm losing train of thought for them now. But the parental rights thing has always been there as long as we've had courts. Women have generally been favored in terms of, even when we think back to King Solomon, who are the people that are arguing about the child? It was two women. There are no men that are involved in the conversation. They're going to slice that baby in half. And we're talking about this is biblical times that we're talking about here. They're willing to slice that baby in half, and no father was involved. Hey, hang on, what do you want to slice my baby? That was not the issue. The men were not involved in that situation because women have always had that place, that protected place.
Can I tell you why that is? And it's something that is so uncontroversial. I'm going to refer you to read about some of the works of some of the pioneers around this. Donald Winnicott, a British, was a pediatrician and a psychoanalyst. Donald Winnicott, and I'll give you more references later. But so what it is that the human child, okay, there's something about their psyche when they grow up. Okay, they are particularly attached during the formative years to one person, a primary caregiver. It's usually called. It's not always the mother, but in the vast majority of cases, it's the mother. And you'd understand why, because the bond starts even before birth. So they're carrying this baby. Some research shows that the fetus already almost kind of recognizes the mom's voice from being inside them. Yeah. Okay, I've seen something. I'm not sure how valid that is, but that the baby can already recognize them. But usually, as soon as they're born, that's the first person. And when for those who breastfeed, it's multiple times a day. So they grow up having a special. Again, we know this. This is not conjecture. And often their outlook to life, how they see life, and how there's a lot about that relationship that it stems from. I'm not saying the father isn't crucial as well. Okay, I'm just saying levels of
up to age 7. Yes, I mean,
yes, how fundamental things are. And so separation from a mother tends to be more traumatic for children than separation from a father. In many cases, it tends to be, particularly the earlier they are. So again, I have to caveat that the earlier they are, because there's a difference in the constancy of the mom compared to the father, and then a lot of it is natural. We talked about how we evolved the other time. A lot of it has sort of evolved with us. So there's plenty of reasons, and often when they go to the family courts, expert evidence comes into it, and people would weigh in and reference this sort of ideas, and that's how often the balance tends to be that women end up with the children. There is method to the madness, but you're right to the extent that perhaps that's not all that matters. Okay, that matters. It's not all that matters, and sometimes we perhaps overlook some of the other things that matter. And I if that's what you're saying, I would agree with that. But
what I'm saying is, I think we're getting a bit tied up in the detail. What the main point I was saying, that I was addressing, was that when we say men have more advantages than women, that is 100% incorrect. The reasons being where I started naming them. So I put a couple of them down as notes, and I can quickly. I just need to fire through them, just because we're focusing on individuals. Yes, the reasons and rationales for all the individual bits and pieces, but it doesn't change the overarching reality when we talk about it. You know, the things I talked about: domestic abuse services available for women. There's just almost none available for men. They just don't exist. It's not a thing. Affirmative action.
We already told you why.
So, but
Forget why. Wait, no, wait, no, wait. You're gonna cut me off again. Let me just say them. Wait, because we keep stopping. Wait, let me just say them. And then what?
Do those numbers exist in Congo or Nigeria?
Let me just say them, and then we can then look at the holistic thing. Because if we start picking each one, we're gonna be here for the next 5 hours. So let me just quickly rattle through really quickly, right? So domestic, violence, we talked about that already. Affirmative action, diversity hiring policies. You don't see any of those things for men. You can see roles where they say we only want women to come in here, and those roles are cut off for women across the world, even in Congo. Using it as an example, we have jobs and opportunities available like that. There's scholarships and grants for women in STEM and business degrees. I know that because I saw that myself, and that's something that's also readily available across everywhere whenever you look for scholarships. You don't see that for men. We've talked about the parental rights one. We've talked about child support enforcement. Doesn't necessarily get enforced that much for women. Generally speaking, women have more social empathy, so they're allowed to be vulnerable. They're allowed to be sad. There's no social penalty for them. They can't break. Men can't break. Women can. There's more emotional support networks as well available for women. Men don't have any of that kind of stuff. In relationships as well, it's a very similar thing. The burden of performance is often on the man. The man is the one that has to perform. He's going to have to provide, take on the first date, take initiative about figuring out where he's going to take her to, pay for things where it's possible, etc., stuff like that. Women sit down and are on the receiving end of a lot of the responsibilities within these things. We all already know that from the legal perspective as well. Men receive longer sentences than women, generally speaking, for the exact same crime. In fact, if you even think about it, the word YouTube doesn't like the word RAPE. I'll use grape, right? They never call it grape when it's a woman that does it to a man. Check all of these teachers things that's been happening.
There's a legal, so in the UK, there's a legal definition for that.
I know.
A woman cannot, by the legal definition, a woman cannot.
I get that. I totally understand that, but I'm
It's
not just talking about
in all countries, but that's the UK.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to go to. That this is also something as a global phenomenon as well. Because even though this doesn't apply in America, they still use the same logic. They'll just say it's sexual harassment or sexual whatever, but they will never use that word.
You have to give me the chance to address some of this point.
I know. I just need to I'm almost done anyway. And then society it begins to generally tend to allow women to have a reinvention. So we talked about some of these things as well. They have children, they can come back into society. After divorce, they can become new entrepreneurs or have new relationships, etc. When men make mistakes, it's a wrap. You go to jail or you go do something, you get caught for something, it's done. Your career is finished. Look at all of these celebrities, everybody they've gone out, they made mistakes, it is over for them. They don't necessarily have the same kind of sympathy in the public eye and in society in general that women have. Now, if you can tell me some areas,
you are wrong.
You're wrong.
More than happy to dive into that. But if you can at least even give me some areas where men are actually in any case or any way.
You're a legal person. Let me just offer my more sort of.
No. Have a go.
Yeah. So
I and Cross have been monopolizing the conversation anyway. So
yeah. Okay. So let me just give my own layman 2 pence, if I can put it that way. So historically, all of these things that you've talked about, first of all, like I've already explained, but I'll repeat it again, are just ways that society, but especially Western society, has tried to address some of these historical differences or disadvantages that women have suffered over centuries. That's what it is, because
that's not true.
So, but hear me out. So those numbers that you talk about, like all those support numbers, if you went to a place like, I don't know, maybe Congo, or you went to Sahara or Nigeria or Ghana, those numbers probably don't exist, because we've got this lag between, because we're copying the West, aren't we? In most of these sort of social areas, there's always a lag. So sometime, hopefully, we will get to the point where women will be able to access some of this support. I think that these supports are actually very important and they're necessary. I think that is something that is worth copying, maybe from.
If a woman is getting beaten in a village in Nigeria, if a woman's getting beaten in a village in Nigeria, and a man's getting beaten in a village in Nigeria,
I'm
what's
not
going
saying
to happen? People and they both run out.
No, please hear me. Okay, let me finish. Just hear me out. So, for reasons you've already explained, that Amy has, very eloquently explained, women are by far victims of domestic violence compared to men. So it does make sense.
That's not true either. It's not
serious violence. Maybe caveated with serious violence.
That makes. I'll say that.
As in by a mile. It's not even close.
Yeah, but men are more likely to become victims of serious violence than women anyway.
From other men.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, sorry, go on, Jab. Sorry.
You need to let others speak. So
I've been trying to talk the whole time. I only just got one final block at the end. You guys are hammering me for 20 minutes.
Colonize the space. You're not letting me speak.
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So the other point I was going to, you said to give examples of advantages that men have been enjoying. It's historical. This we talked about this because of biology. Yeah, women have to give birth and have children and all of those things that men have to, hunter-gatherers, provide for the family. And we talked about how economics interacts with history to the point then where the people who hold power, if you look at political power, economic power, happen to be men, and they have kept that power to themselves. And if we let's take America, for instance, the history of America, only white Caucasian male vote, could own property, etc., etc. Women couldn't do that. It wasn't very long ago that women were allowed to vote.
But men couldn't vote either.
Brown people could vote. No, but what I'm getting at is there is a historical difference. It's like somebody saying because there are affirmative action or XYZ policies that you can point to allow, let's say, black boys or black men to have something close to equal representation. Now point to those and say, actually, black men are more advantaged than white men. It's not. These are just measures to correct differences that have been there historically. But I'll let you.
You're saying so many fallacious things. I'm struggling. I'm just struggling with the not. You're saying so many. So you said one woman had to have children. Women don't have to have children. They never have. They've never had to have children. Okay, they've never had to.
So you're taking
more recently. I want to come recently even now.
I'll answer that. I'll answer the question. You're asking me a question. So
yeah, but I haven't finished. How can you answer when I haven't finished? Wait. Let me ask the question.
Let me explain myself. Okay? The point I'm making is that men don't give birth, do they? Men don't have. Men don't get pregnant and have children.
Okay.
Right? So that's not our biology. What I'm trying to explain here is that women, because of their biology, they're the ones who get pregnant. They are the ones that have to carry the child for the pregnancy for 9 months. They have to give birth. Then they have to nurture the child, and then the woman keeps. Does that make sense? And historically,
I get it, but again, for me, it's the induction fallacy that you've done. You use that as a baseline, and you use that as a baseline to say that. No, but this one I wanted to finish the question before you started answering, because you're not. This is not related to the question. You started the point that you are using that as your anchor, this is your induction fallacy here. That you're saying women had to have kids, therefore men were able to collect and control and have all the power fundamentally concentrated within them. At which point you then moved on to things like voting, etc. It's like, well, women they don't have to have children. Is the first point I'm trying to raise. And the second point is the fact of having children affects both males and females. When you have kids, in most cases, in most cases, you have to spend time, effort, etc., raising, protecting, caring for them. Maybe not as much as the woman in terms of, especially in the first year, 2, 3 years, etc., stuff like that. But it doesn't take away from the fatherhood responsibilities of having and raising children. So it's not that men all of a sudden, I'm going to just grant you that women have to have kids. It doesn't automatically mean that men are, yes, automatically this awesome position of power where they no longer have to do anything and can consolidate all this power and wealth. The vast majority of men cannot afford to have a woman sit down at home and take care of children. They both have to work.
Okay.
That's the vast majority of families.
I am describing something that historically correct. I don't even know why you're having an argument with that. And the point I am making is you're picking the tiniest. I didn't want to go into detail about this because we've already covered this in a different episode. Yeah. What we explained there, it was an evolution. All I've done is to contract a 90-minute podcast into into a minute. You know, the evolution is such that because of women's biology, because of the constraints that biology has imposed on them, it's allowed men, it's given men advantage in politics, in economics, and to control and shape the society, if you want to put it that way. Yeah, from fending for food to defending, things have morphed, as it were, into this situation where men. So a good example is, let's say, the USA, right? For several centuries, the only people who could vote and be voted for were rich white men, right?
Landowners, fundamentally, really.
Yes, landowners. Yes, but who are those? The men.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, mostly.
Yes, they excluded everybody else. But you can look across most human societies. What you're going to find is that because of what I've just described, men have had the power and most of these advantages that we're talking about, because for that reason.
But the part I'm struggling with is the advantage.
And the reason is you can explain it simply because of the biology. Just like we said earlier, if a woman, if you have a man and a woman, or let's say, a man and a woman going in for 2 jobs, and the woman goes and has 6 children, while the man carries on working, at the end of 20 years, they're not going to be in the same place, are they, in terms of job prospects? They just won't be, because the woman has had to take that much time out.
But how's that an advantage? Because again, men don't have safety nets, so men have to work.
No, you're changing the subject now. I think we should let Yemi explain, because he's been listening.
I'm happy.
It's fine, because this is why I was trying to keep us back on track, because we kept deviating, so we're losing the main thing that I was trying to talk about. And the main thing is the fact that men don't have, in fact, not even necessarily, don't have any advantages over women.
But you're the one saying, so you're saying we're deviating. So what you want to do is to make a list, and the list go unchallenged, because every time someone wants to challenge your list, you say they're deviating. So maybe
no.
If what you want is you just make the list and we say
no. You can challenge the list, but this isn't linked to the list. There's nothing. I mean, right now, talk about people owning money and land and chattel and that being voting rights. It doesn't link to anything else.
It's a subsection. So my understanding of why Jap came up with that point is he's trying to explain. So he's making a point about historical injustices being rectified as now creating the illusion that women are advantaged, right? And I think that's why he made that example. Correct me if I've misunderstood it.
That's what
I get that. I totally get that.
So sometimes some things may sound like they're off, but if you kind of follow there's a.
I was trying to address that already as well. I was trying to address that by saying that a lot of these things.
The other day, like literally voting. It was just the other day that women were given
but just the other day, all men could only vote 10 years before women could vote. Before that, it was not democracy.
That's not correct.
Check. It was before that. Democracy wasn't to all men. It was only to landowners.
That's
check.
No,
I mean, Google search of check.
Can I ask Ross a question? And I think the question I'm going to ask you here again is to go to the heart of how we interpret data. Yep. You're right, as far as I'm aware, that women get more lenient sentences for, in quotes, the same offenses than men. But I'll put it to you. If I took you to see a gang of criminal men, drug dealer, murderers, right? And a gang of women of the same crimes. Who do you think you will perceive as more dangerous?
I think I'll perceive them equally as dangerous because
no.
No,
So
I'm
again,
not.
I say this as someone who actually has some experience working with offenders. The reality is that male offenders in general, again, this is just generalization. I'm not saying it's true for every single case. They're just generally more dangerous to others. There's nobody who works
No,
with
but you said the same crimes. So based on my own
even
experience,
who've committed the same crimes,
anecdotal.
yeah.
Well, my
Even
anecdotal
who've committed the
experience.
same crimes.
My
Sorry?
anecdotal experience, particularly in Nigeria, right, was a lot of people where I'd see women who have killed people and men who have killed people. They're both equal. I'm not going to look at one and say,
okay,
they're equally as dangerous. I'm going to look at them and say, these two people are dangerous.
Let me paint some of the examples to you. Again, I say this from some personal experience. Not again, I'm not saying my experience is infallible, but I'm just
anecdotal.
This is So what you will find when they say often a woman's murdered someone, right? You would find more commonly. Again, I'm not saying so. I'm saying what's more common with women than men, and what's more common with men than women. But you'd
Less
find everything with everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you'd
less
find
violent
you'd find a woman who poisons our child and kills them. Okay, they're a murderer. This is murder.
Less violent methods, generally.
But not just less violent. They're not dangerous to society compared to so a guy who goes on a robbery spree and kills people in the process is not as dangerous to society as a woman who kills a child. They're both murderers.
A man who kills his child.
Sorry?
No, but a man who kills his child with the same method of using poison is
No.
not as dangerous as the guy
But
who
when
goes
they say the same
killing spree with a
offenses,
gun.
no. But the same offenses doesn't account for the details. This is what I'm telling you. It's murder.
Yes,
that's what it means. The same offenses.
We know why.
Do you think when they do this research, they then go into the details of the murder?
Yes, they do.
No.
Okay, so this is where a lot of that ocean framework comes into play as well. That it explains to a large extent why women use less violent methods, because all humans naturally have to express aggression in some way.
Yes,
now,
but I'm
women
just
are not
telling
able
you
to
why. So why lock up two people for the same length of time if, by your own admission, they are less violent? You've just said women use less violence. Again,
yes, but not in
what
all
is
cases.
The point of locking both of them up for exactly the same time if they're less violent? Again,
I'm saying even for the same crime and the same behavior. So a woman shoots a man or shoots an innocent bystander by accident. There are multiple examples of this one as well. Multiple. A woman shoots a man, right? Or shoots somebody else she and her boyfriend are doing a robbery. These are two scenarios. A boyfriend and girlfriend, two robbers, go to a shop. They're trying to rob the shop. In the middle of the robbery attempt, she accidentally lets off the gun and shoots an innocent bystander, goes away. Reverse scenario happens as well. The man accidentally shoots an innocent bystander, goes away. The man goes to jail 65% longer, or gets a 65% longer sentence on average than the woman would for the same crime. Now,
I think the stat you're quoting might be overestimated. So 65% sounds more than what it is in reality. But having said that, though, again, I think you are missing something here. I'm quite confident that you are, and I'm saying this as someone who's worked in female secure estates and male secure estates. They're apples and oranges. Like you walk into a female a prison, right, and you interact with female prisoners. They're different species to males, totally different. I said, I'm not joking with you. I mean, criminal species, totally different. Like you tell me these people are as dangerous as this ones. Are you kidding me? The same offenses. Again, I'm going down right to the same offenses because you call them murder, burglary, and like this lady here, as dangerous as this guy, for real? Of course not.
Not as dangerous, but you're not going to see them any less dangerous, though. They're still dangerous.
No, you will. And this goes into the sentencing. So often when judges sentence people, They do pre-sentencing reports.
That's exactly right. Back
No,
on.
no,
Yeah, go on. Sorry, go on. You just
let
proved
me
my
finish.
point.
They do pre-sentencing reports where what they call them, the offender manager. Sometimes they get expert witnesses to come in, and they come and they do a pre-sentence report. And what that report is to give a panoramic view of this person's life, what led them into offending, and what their prospects of rehabilitation is. Okay.
Yep.
What you will find again in many cases, I'm just trying not to give examples because I don't want to, is that when you look at all of the stories, they are all tragic. Again, I'm not making excuses for the women, they're all tragic. But often with the female cases, they're doubly tragic when you look at the life experiences that led them into that. Women just are much less likely to commit violent crimes than men. And so often when you find them doing it, there's plenty of mitigation behind it. If you look at the story.
You're just proving my point.
No, I'm not proving your point. And that factors into how judges view criminal responsibility. So when you are looking at criminal responsibility, you have to factor in everything that has gone on before.
You're proving my point.
No, I'm not proving your point.
You're
just
very
hearing what you want.
you're
Hearing what you want to hear. I'm not proving.
No, what you are saying that women generally don't do bad things. Therefore, when women do bad things, we're a bit nicer to them. That's the summary of what you just said.
No, that's not the
summary. That's what you said. I'm summarizing to like the
No. That's not the summary of what I've said. What I've said is that there's a concept of criminal responsibility, right? Okay, so someone's done something wrong. You take what they've done wrong, then you understand all of the factors around it. That's why two people kill someone, and one's called manslaughter, another one's called first-degree murder, another one's called second-degree murder, another one's called third. There are different levels of responsibility.
I know. I studied law for 2 years. I understand that.
They've committed the same act. But even when you then convict them for the same crime, so let's say third-degree murder, both of them, there are then different set of circumstances.
Let's say first degree.
Let's say first degree. There's still different set of circumstances around them. So again, let me give you an example to this. So you've got a man who he's met a new girl, right? And he falls in love with her and yada, yada, yada. And then he plots for 3 months how to eliminate his wife and so that he can run off with this new one. And he throws her into a river. So hypothetical cases, and he runs off with a new woman and does everything to cover his tracks, right? That's first degree murder, premeditation, blah, 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 everything. Then you've got the second one, who is a woman who's a victim of domestic abuse. You know, this guy's been abusing her for years, cheating on her, abusing her in different ways, physically, psychologically. And she gets to a point one evening where she thinks, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm going to kill him. She spends a couple of hours plotting and picks up a knife and kills him. They're the same offense. I can tell you in most cases, that guy is going to get a longer sentence than the woman. In many cases, again, I can't preempt a judge, but in many cases you'd expect that. And
but why are you comparing apples to oranges though? Because that's not
they're both first degree murder.
Well, no, that's probably likely to be second degree in most cases, because she's in most cases reacting to feelings, emotions. It was not premeditated.
First degree premeditation.
Yeah, but in most cases, that kind of thing will be seen as a crime of passion, which is different. And in most cases, you wouldn't get
premeditation. She spent a couple of hours planning.
Oh, well, spend a couple of hours. Okay, fair enough. I mean,
premeditation. It doesn't matter whether your premeditation is 3 months or So again, so the point I'm making, don't let's get too sidelined. But the point I'm making is that both of them are the same crime, but you can see different sets of circumstances that will most likely result in different sentences. Okay, and so these things, I am saying to you that women commit more of these crimes with usually more of those sort of circumstances than men do. Again, I doubt that many people who work with these people would disagree with that.
I mean, if I'm working with them, etc., it doesn't change the fact that when we look at the actual crimes. So, for example, I'm trying to remember a name. I can't remember. Can't remember her name. Gabrielle Pabito. I can't remember her name. Who did a very similar thing? Who got tried to get an assassin to kill her husband, and that was conspiracy to commit murder. There's a whole bunch of crimes that she got pulled, charges that she got for that. Carly Esposito, I can't remember. I need to check. Maybe I'll put that in the comments. So if somebody who's watching and knows who I'm talking about, please and put it on there. But there are quite a few examples of people who have done very, very manly, quote unquote, kinds of ways of committing crimes in the masculine way, where the circumstances as well could be things like money, finances. There's this other woman that fairly recently did it with her boyfriend who was being scammed and told that he was going to get millions of dollars, and she's got somebody else to kill him. It's still the same concept at the end of the day. The actions that they take, they still don't necessarily get the same treatment by society. Is the key thing. Whether or not we can go into the detail and the specifics about it, and there's some cases where
because in general they're just less dangerous. I think society is responding reasonably. Men are on average more dangerous than women,
which is fine. I mean, I think again, we're kind of almost going into the weeds of it. There are reasons behind all of these things, but it doesn't change the fact that, generally speaking, women are more advantaged than men in society today, which is the key point I'm trying to put out.
Yeah, I think I'll let you off on that overall point, and I'll let you off because I think that point will always be contentious. Even the position I made initially, you can tell that I'm not. I feel there's more nuance than the way I made it, and I'm not. It's not a hill I'm willing to die on. But I'm sure. I suspect you're also wrong. But I'm not confident that I'm totally right. So I'm not, it's not one that I'm going to.
The problem is you have to go through so many of these things that I've listed out to be able to say all of them are wrong. And to prove the point that women are not treated differently.
They don't all have to be wrong. So my view when I said that, and you can see I was kind of cautious when I was saying it, was that I kind of, in general, the point I was trying to make is what is easier in society? Is it easier to be a man or easier to be a woman? I'm not saying it'll be easier on every single point, right? But globally, what's easier? I still think, even if it's on a small margin, that being a man would be easier than a woman. But I can think about, just as you suggested, I can think about many ways in which it's easier to be a woman. I don't dispute that. But I think overall, I think it's easier to be a man. But I'm not.
I want to hear.
I'm not going to be evangelical about that point.
Can you give me some scenarios where it's easier to be a man? By easier, I mean easier. I don't mean that by you working harder, because working harder is not easier. It's literally harder.
No. So working harder is not easier, but having the opportunity to do it is easier. So what you'll find is that certainly in some industries, if you're a man compared to a woman, you might be more favored in employment because of, again, that's some of what is hypothesized to represent the gender pay gap, which is that employers will favor employing a man over a woman under certain circumstances, because particularly women of a particular age, women within reproductive age group, because they know that they're going to go on maternity leave.
Correct.
So 25. So they'll say between the ages of 18 to 35.
They don't specify it because it's illegal. What will happen is you attend the interviews and they just have a bias towards the man because they think that they're more likely not to take this extended time off.
But the thing is, and this is the thing, that this does not reflect reality, because especially in STEM, I'm more in the data, tech, IT sort of world, and in my world there are lots of different systems, forums, networking events, programs, outreaches, etc., trying to get women to come in to join.
That's because STEM is it generally attracts more men. So I don't think. Yeah. I'm not saying.
So what you're saying about the bias?
No. I'm not saying the reason there's a bias. Again,
No. I'm saying, how can there be bias if there are programs that are specifically designed to ensure there's no bias?
Okay. Let me explain this to you in another way. Okay, there are many ways I can do this. So I went. I went to in Scotland when I worked in Scotland years ago. I had a group that I played football with, and they were mostly consultants from the hospital, and a few of us who at the time were in consultants who used to play with them. So I wasn't driving then, so one of them would come home to pick me up, and usually another one will drop me. So we had this kind of friendly arrangement. So once I got picked up by one of them, who then ran into his friend as we were going, who they had a quick chat and we left. And then he said to me, "Do you know what my friend was asking me?" He was asking because he asked him, where are you guys going to? So I was going to play football. And so it was one of the local scouts, football scouts.
Okay.
So he was checking whether I would be good enough to get in the team. And do you know why he was doing that? Because in the small town Kilmarnock, then there are no black people at all. And usually when you find black people there, they're either in the football team or doing some professional job, IT, doctor, something like that.
Yeah.
So, and because he's a football scout, he's thinking there's a big
Footballer.
chance this guy could be a footballer. Do you see how the world works? Okay. So this is how the world works. So if you had seen an Asian person, he wouldn't have thought so. Is this making sense to you now? So when you get on the interview panel,
gender,
again, no, I'm talking about, so I'm not saying, and the reason I'm saying that is to say, if you look at the football teams, right? All of the football teams, so 40% of the English Premier League is people who identify as black. 40%. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a justifiable reason why someone thinks.
Wait, identify as black or are they black?
I and Farouk have had this conversation. So they are black, not identify as black. But and the reason why I said I and Farouk have had this conversation, and why I use that language identify, which you're right, that's not the right language, is I think there's a problem because people of mixed race, if one of your parents white and the other is black,
which one are
and you label them for the purpose of that statistics as black, you are overestimating black contribution to the game. Do you understand do you understand where I'm coming from there?
Yeah,
because this person should fit into both
categories.
White and black category if you're trying to look at representation. Do you see where I'm coming from? And that's why I kind of caveat it a little bit. But the point I'm making is that these things then become biases that move beyond them. So if I am an Asian person show up to this guy's interview, right, this local football scout, I already have a head start. I mean, this is the reality of life that happens.
I don't know how you can apply that to gender, because I can see with genetics.
It happens in gender as well.
Let me try again. So Yemi is absolutely, I won't say correct, but I agree with him 100%. So here's the thing: if you were an employer, say there were no rules and it wasn't against the law, and you had two people come for a job. One is a man and the other is a woman within childbearing age, right? Knowing that if you employ them, you're going to have to pay them for, let's say, a year maternity leave. It might be 6 months or whatever, but let's just say for a year. Okay. So they won't be at work for a year and you're going to pay them maternity leave for that period of time.
Yep.
Yeah. Who would you employ? The man or the woman?
In this hypothetical world, I'll employ the woman. Do you know why?
Okay.
Because I can pay her less. The man is going to be more disagreeable. He's going to be chasing higher income. He's going to be more assertive, more dominant, etc. If I can get this, because we're going back to the pay gap, right? If this woman cost me 20% less anyway, in 4 years, she would have earned that 1 year.
How are they going to pay you 20%? They're not going to pay you 20%. They're going to be doing exactly the same job. You are going to be paying them exactly because why
am I paying them the same? Because the whole point of this question is the pay gap, right? So we're trying to understand the pay gap.
No. So in the NHS, for instance, me and my female colleagues, for instance, we will get the same pay, right? So they're on the same pay scale, but one person
depends. It depends.
Same pay scale. One person is going to go off.
No, not always. But sorry, go on. I'll let you go with the hypothetical.
It's exactly the same.
I mean, I was on the AFC band, and there's other things that you can add on to it, RRPs, etc. Depending on the skill set that you bring, depending on you know the RRPs, right?
So to take it from me, same pay scale.
If you have two orthopedic surgeons, they bring the same skill set, more or less.
I mean, true. I mean, So if we're talking about I think NHS was too broad. But anyway, go on. Yeah, go on. Sorry, let me not deviate.
That is a scenario. That is a scenario that I'm trying to give you. You know, who are you going to pick?
If I have a man and a woman to pick for a job.
Yeah, the scenario that I've just told you. Same pay scale. One person is going to go off on
No,
maternity
but
leave.
do I know they're going to go off? 100%. I know
They
they're
are
going to go off.
likely, again,
You
they're
know,
more likely they're a woman.
more likely to. So
They're
we don't
26.
know. Yeah, the woman, even if she was going to, she's not going to tell you on that day.
No, but so
Baby next.
this is an interesting conversation because I've been a hiring manager for I don't know, the past 7-8 years, right, here in the UK, and I've hired multiple women into my teams. I've literally fairly recently, 2 weeks, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, just given a job, given an offer, and she's accepted it, a woman into my team. There were other males that applied for the role as well, but she was the best qualified candidate. I didn't look at the fact that she could be pregnant in next. It's not occurring to me. It's like, if it is what it is.
That's
Okay.
a good thing. But do you accept?
That's
But do you accept that there are people that would do that?
Do I accept that the people that will look at me being black and not give me a job? Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
yes,
I mean, it's
yes.
the reality. These
Yes.
things happen, but it's not.
Absolutely.
The issue is, is it a
and
commonality,
women,
though?
and women are more on the receiving end of that.
Thank you.
Based on gender than
I
men.
don't believe that.
Exactly.
I just don't think there's evidence for it. I just don't see any
There
evidence.
is.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence for it.
Why are we
There
arguing
just
about?
isn't. There isn't.
Sorry, but one second. I think. Look, guys. I think it's important. I don't think we should be arguing about against facts. I think that we could offer an insight or a perspective on something that is factual. I think arguing against facts.
Well,
is
no,
just
the problem.
facts.
No,
Wait, what's
doesn't.
the facts?
He disagrees
You can't just
that
say
it's a fact.
facts.
So you can't.
What's the
simply say
facts?
it's a fact because he
Give me the
disagrees.
number. I want to hear a number. Give me a study. You can't
No.
tell me it's a fact.
No,
I need to know what the fact is.
what I've explained to you, particularly now in the NHS, and Yemi agrees with that. That is exactly the scenario, which is that.
That is on that. Sorry, go on.
So
that-
the scenario I gave you, which is
That they're
if you have-
choosing men over women based off of that.
no. The scenario I've just painted, which is that the man and the woman are on the same pay scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pay them the same amount of money, and the woman, if the woman decides to have a child
Mm-hmm.
or be pregnant to have children, even if she does that 4 times, you will still pay her.
Yes,
Right?
agreed. Yeah.
So, which is a good thing. And thankfully, it's lawful to do that. And it's against the law to discriminate against the woman on the basis of gender. But you can see how somebody else, right? If this law were not there, you can see how women might be discriminated against.
I can understand your feelings about it, but the facts just don't bear up. They don't stand against what you're saying. So the workforce distribution of the NHS, for example, is predominantly female. The vast majority of staff within the NHS. When I was NHS digital, because I used to do the reporting for a lot of that stuff on there.
No, thank you.
Hold on. Let me just.
It hasn't always been that way. It hasn't always been that way.
So the workforce distribution is predominantly female. NHS overall, NHS England, NHS digital, predominantly female. And whether we're talking about the specialist roles and occupations that are there, whether we're talking about the general roles, we're talking about the AFC banding, even the only part that it starts becoming predominantly male, which is what happens with this gender pay gap conversation, is when we start going band 9, VSM 1s, 2, 3s, the highest earning areas. When you look at the bands, all the bands, the 8C, 8, no, well, not 8C, I think 8B, 8A, 7, 6, 5, 4, it's all, you start seeing
that, but it hasn't always been that way.
So when was it? When that doesn't even matter, because your point was that the hiring.
This is the point we're making. So things have corrected because of this support that you keep criticizing, right?
I didn't criticize it. I didn't criticize. I just pointed out that they exist.
Okay, that you've pointed out, right? So these support mechanisms have come into place to correct these historical, I don't want to call them injustices, but these historical differences. This is the point I'm making. This is the point that Yemi and I are making, right?
That's not the point that you're making, though.
You always need to follow the money, and everything makes sense.
Follow the money. So Jab, let me just interrupt you there. So I've got this good friend, and I told him, I was trying to explain something to him, and I said, listen, a friend of mine always says, if you want to understand anything, follow the money. And I used it to explain the scenario. He just went crazy laughing, saying he's learned something and he's going to, that framework works so well.
No, but do you know what I mean?
Follow the money.
does. It does. Which is that if you, in the scenario I've given you, I am not going to employ the woman, right? Unless, of course, because I want to maximize profit. So of course I'm not going to employ the woman.
I don't, because the thing you need to, you can't.
Please let me land. I'm not going to employ the woman that I know is more likely, because if there's anybody who's going to go and have children, it's going to be the woman, right? The man will carry on working, and the woman is going to go and look after her child for 1 year. Why would I be paying her for a whole year, and then she's going to do it 4 more times when I can just employ a man? Do you see? So these differences that we're talking about, this is historical. This is what has been going on. And because now we have recognized that it's important to allow women into the workforce and to allow them to thrive and look after their families and and all that kind of things, all of which we support, we have now put measures to correct those. As a result of which, you are telling me now in the NHS there are more women than men up to band 8 or whatever it is. Above that, you still have that.
So just something more to add. So more women in the NHS up to band 8. And then above that, you begin to have men.
I think it was about 8D. But again, we're going back to the thing of competence,
because the
interest.
lower paid roles, there's no problems giving it all to women.
Exactly.
Who cares?
No, but no, that's not. You can't. We're throwing in things again that don't just have any bearing.
It goes back to what we're saying, which is that some of these women are going to take time out to go and have their families and all that, right? And so it does make sense that the higher you go, the more men you're going to find in that place, because they don't need those breaks.
That's not just the only reason why. No.
It's not the only reason.
And also you find, with no disrespect at all, you'd find that the roles like the healthcare assistant, who are reasonably lower paid, would be dominated by women, skewing the numbers, skewing the overall numbers significantly.
But so what we did, especially in NHS Digital, what I used to report every month, and I used to put this out to the board and have papers of it out there public. These are publicly available bits of information on there. Shows the breakdown by banding from top to bottom. So you can see the distribution by gender across all of them.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. This is a wild guess. I would guess that as you go lower on the banding, the proportion of women increases significantly, and it lowers as you go up.
No, so which was interesting, because you kind of expect it to look like that.
Yeah.
So at some point, we're almost calling it like a Christmas tree, because it was like this, and then it comes back to the middle. In that the areas around the middle earnings, the 8As, which 8A in the UK, I think 8A on the banding now is £47,000 or something, which is higher than the UK average. That's a decent income, right? So it was fairly equal across that space. With a
so that's where most of the nurses will be sitting.
Exactly, but I mean, we're talking exactly. But then also this also applies to other ancillary services, so NHS England, NHS Digital as well, which is also more technical staff, administrative staff, project specialists, etc., all those kind of things. And it was, you would have, like, at the lower banding, there's more women, but again, that's because you're talking about like secretaries, things like that.
That's what I'm going to say, because when you go lower down, you're having receptionists, healthcare assistants. They're almost entirely women.
It's basically, it's female dominated. So when we looked into that and checked the actual detail, these were actual female dominated roles. That's just the reality of them. Administrative staff, clerical staff, and receptionists, things like that were just mostly, and again, executive secretaries were a big one, because NHS for some reason used to do a lot of spending on that. But and again, this is publicly available. I can talk about, because I used to share this. I share this publicly. The information is available out there. But as you get to the top, it was still, even though you're getting to the higher income earners, it was still fairly distributed. It will be reducing a little bit.
No, I agree with you. So the NHS is a public organization, and it does a lot of work. It does a lot of work to try to address that. The immediate past NHS England boss was a female, and it wasn't an abnormal thing in the NHS. A lot of managers that
before NHS Digital, the CEO at the time, Sarah Wilkinson, another woman as well.
Yes, but you have to factor in the fact that the NHS is a public organization. It's the biggest employer in Europe. It's at the heart of this positive change to equalize things. So, even though what we're seeing is, as you're describing from your data, is encouraging and good, it's not necessarily reflective of society as a whole.
But it is. In most organizations,
Mm,
in most organizations, it's close to 50-50 splits. And when it comes to most organizations monitor gender pay gaps. Anyway, in most cases, you would find the exact same skewness that happens. And this is the heart of the conversation we're having today about is the highest paying jobs, the higher paying roles that tend to be skewed towards men for a number of different reasons. Again, we've talked about this occupational choice. What job do you intend to choose? What industry do you work within? What education, skills, and experience do you have? How many years of experience do you have within those capabilities?
I don't
How much
dispute
effort?
that. I don't dispute that. So some of that is real, and I think I did explain that at the start when I used my own self as an example. Sometimes, even being there, being available, being for whatever reason, being unavailable, it slows you down. So maternity leave, sick leave, travel plans, or whatever it is, it slows you
Don't even
down.
go that far. Because I mean, what you said earlier, you said this yourself. You said that you work incredibly long hours. You work long hours in comparison to
I do more than most men.
More than most men, exactly. Which is and that's really important to point out. Work effort. Funny enough, work effort was one of the biggest characteristics that accounted for. This is an interesting one again. That accounted for the pay gap. It accounted for somewhere around 45% of that pay gap when we're talking about other extraneous factors. Because men, even if they have kids, even if they have a family, it doesn't matter. Men who are driven are going to work those extra hours. On average, men tended to work about 65 hours for every woman's 40.
And again, I don't dispute that at all, and which is why I am saying there's devil in the detail. So to some extent, I agree on the sort of socialist views, and in fact, not to some extent, to a large extent. I think those things are, but we shouldn't then stretch it to mean that you have to totally. So again, some of the examples we gave when we had this conversation previously. So you're talking about male and female football, for example. You're never going to be able to pay them equally.
You can't. No.
Again, so you can do that. I would pay male and female footballers equally who represent their country. So the England male national team and the England female national team, I think they're doing exactly the same job. They should be paid exactly the same.
Nope.
But I'm not going to pay Manchester United male players the same as the female players. It doesn't make any economic sense. But
how would it make sense for the male England team to get the same as the female?
Because it's an opportunity. I think that being able to represent your country, right? Because it's a call-up you get. It's not it's a privilege. And I think I would reward that equally, just the ability to fly the flag. I think what is important there is the ability to fly the flag, not necessarily.
They still need to make money though. And if people aren't watching the female football.
Yes, but I think flying the flag to me is what you are doing. And doesn't matter whether and you're playing against your peers, because you can say that we're the same. So if you're talking about boxing, for example, and the weight categories. So if you are a heavyweight, you're fighting heavyweight, and if you are a lower weight, you're fighting a lower weight. The reason why, and I'll explain this, because it's also the reason why often I'd pay them the same is that often the loyalty that you find is the national loyalty. So I'm as keen on Nigerian women playing. When I'm watching them, I'm as keen on wanting them to win as I am on the male. Makes no difference that the women playing. I still want them to win. I'm Nigerian. You see what I mean? So, and a lot of people feel that way. So I would pay them the same. The reason why I wouldn't pay the national, the club sides the same is that there's just no. So if you go to the stadiums, they don't attract the same amount of audiences. The ticket prices are cheaper for that reason, and the game is just not as exciting. Again, you can pretend.
How's that different from what you just said about the male female national? Is the same?
No. So there's a slight difference there because
there's a flag.
Yes. I think you are flying the flag of your country. You go somewhere in the service of your country. I think I'd remunerate them the same. I think I would.
Just because they've got a flag?
Yes,
I mean,
just like I would remunerate. So let me give you another example. So if you look at the Olympic sports,
it's like paying male and female soldiers the same, isn't it? I presume.
But it's not the same because male and female soldiers generally provide the same value at the same level.
If we go to the Olympics, for example, some sports are more popular than others in the Olympics. So we carry a contingent of 60 people to the Olympics. And one's doing a shot put, which is not as popular as the sprint. I would still pay them all the same because they are all in the Olympic team going to represent the country. I'll pay them the same. This is how. So again,
but you're veering into this. You're veering right now back into the same challenge that we've got with the gender pay gap as well, of saying,
and again, the
at what
country,
cost
no. The country
of what you've
doesn't
done.
send people to the World Cup to make profit. It just
No,
doesn't.
I know that, but you need to think about what
Manchester
the cost.
United is a business.
No, but you need to think about the cost of what it is that you are doing.
No.
If
The
you say no,
country
I'll
doesn't
tell.
send people to make profit. It doesn't.
I know that, but you also need to understand that the market doesn't necessarily just work on profit. It also works on incentives. You talked about incentives earlier as well, so you've also mentioned this point.
So let me tell you the problem with incentive here, and I'm sorry to interrupt
Can I?
you.
Sorry, guys, we've gone past 90 minutes.
I've gone
Right.
wow. It's an interesting conversation we've had.
Well,
Quite a few different
let's do
areas.
our closing thought in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
But I'd close with the issue of incentive, just to clarify that. So for high-level sportsmen, I've got this book that I can share with you the next time we speak that I dabbled into. So there was a research that they said to high-performance sports people, okay, at the Olympics, that there's this drug, hypothetical drug, right?
Mhm.
If you take it, you're going to die within 5 years, but you will win the Olympic gold before doing it. I think about 70% of them said they would take it. When you so people who do high performance sports, yeah, they are super incentivized. If you think that giving them an extra £5,000 incentivize them, it doesn't. The most elite of them, they just want to win. That's the first thing. In fact, they want to win so much. Lots of them said they will win. They will accept getting the gold to die in 5 years. That is this is the kind of people you're dealing with. The guys who used to play for Manchester United in the days where they had to do part-time work, where they weren't paying them. They weren't paying them very well. They did part-time. They were just as motivated as the ones earning 200K now. Go check it. They were.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that for me, I can see how what would start happening is if you level the playing field to that degree, people who are interested in doing 400 meters or 200 meters even say, man, actually, I can get the same money for doing 100 meters because all paid the same. I can just do the sprint. Why am I doing the more? Why am I doing more work for the same pay?
Jack Grealish doesn't go and play for England because of pay. He just does.
He does.
For
He
England.
does.
For
I mean,
England.
it's clouts. It's more clouts rather than pay at that point because he's already earning enough.
Exactly why I would pay them the same because
But that won't work. That won't work with when we're talking about the gender because if the female English team doesn't earn that degree to which they can start making that selection. Essentially, it's not to that level of prevalence. I'm crossing into murky territory.
Fair enough, but I agree with you. For the club size, I wouldn't pay them the same. They don't draw the same amount of audience. They don't generate the same amount of attention. They don't generate the same amount of income. They play. They're just not as fast. They don't run as fast. They're not as skillful. They don't shoot as hard. That is a fact, and that's not going to change. And there's no need for us to pretend like it will. This is
I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. It's just what it is.
It's right? That's a men's territory to the extent that biology has made it that way. There are some sports where women do as well and better than men, like gymnastics and things like that. And even some sports where they attract as much audience, like female boxing now. So Katie Taylor draws in a lot of crowds. So she gets paid much more than some men. Fair enough, because she puts bombs on stage. She's very exciting. But when you talk about things like football and basketball, it's just, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, my closing one, Jab, if you want me to go first, or so my closing view is, I mean, going back to the whole thing, we've covered a lot in this episode, which has been actually quite entertaining. I've thoroughly enjoyed it as usual. But my closing view is really just on the fact that I think when we think about this pay gap piece, it's not just about the data itself. Because you look at that, you say there's a pay gap, and then what does that mean? Is it that women are being treated differently? Is it that women don't deserve what they have? I think, and from the research, as what the research says, is most of it can be explained away due to choices. People make choices about what it is that they want to do. Men also make choices, but we often forget about that. Men have to make choices to be hyper successful. They need to work extra hours. They need to be more driven. They need to be more cutthroat, more assertive, more dominant, etc. Not saying women aren't and women cannot be, but more often than not, it's men that make that decision to do that. And we don't talk about the consequences of these things on men. If you look at some of the most successful men in the world at the moment, most of them are either divorced or they're estranged from their families. They have their own issues that come as a consequence of them focusing on their businesses and all that. But we don't talk about that because that's not important. What's important is the pay gap. And I think giving women the opportunity to make these choices has been the best possible thing we could do with the world right now. We've said, you want to earn as much as a man? Take it. It's yours. Go out there and make those decisions, take those actions in this world that has been designed for us the way that we work best. We don't have any other society that works in any other way. This is how society works. Those masculine traits are what provide the value that we're able to have in the world today. If we could change it and we could come up with a more feminine kind of society that works, let's do it. But it's not worked. It's not working. And I think the choices that people make result in the consequences that we get as a result, or not even just the consequences, the outcomes that we get as a result. And more often than not, we tend to end up having women making decisions that result in something that looks like a gender pay gap. But in reality, in my view and in my estimation, it's a choice pay gap, because men also who make similar choices have that pay gap to their peers. Jab?
Okay, thank you. So am I having the last word?
Last word.
Oh, you. Right. Okay. So I think
if you don't say something too provocative.
No, I never
Round
do.
me up.
I never do. It's not my character to do that. So no, I think that historically men have been advantaged over women for reasons that we can trace to, by and large, biology. I think that a lot of the support mechanisms that have been put in place to correct these historical advantages can be perceived by some people as can be seen by some people as too much support, as it were, for women, or that women are better advantaged than men. I don't accept that argument at all. I think it's a good thing that these changes have happened. No human system is perfect. In some places, yes, maybe we can start to see how men may be, disadvantaged in some way or the other. But that, I think, is not an argument for going back to how things used to be centuries ago. And let's also bear in mind that this conversation we've spoken as though this is what happens right across the world, but actually, this conversation is really centered around Western society, because in many parts of the world, outside the West, women are still very, 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 very much disadvantaged. So
point.
yeah, so that's a really important point to highlight. But I have enjoyed the conversation. I've learned, quite a lot from both speakers, and thank you. And we'll look forward to doing it again same time next week.
Cheerio.
As always. Peace out.
Thank you.